Hector Lombard taking on Rousimar Palhares. What a fight this is at middleweight. Lombard, 31 wins, 3 losses, 1 draw, 1 no contest as a pro. Palhares, 14 wins and 4 losses. Lombard coming off a split decision loss in his UFC debut to 16-4 Tim Boetsch on July the 21st of this year at UFC 149, while Palhares also coming off a loss, a TKO loss in the first round to 18-6 Alan Belcher on May the 5th of this year at UFC on Fox 3. Lombard has 17 of his 31 wins via knockout with 7 submissions and 7 decisions, while Palhares 10 of 14 wins, of course, via submission with 3 decisions and 1 knockout. Lombard has lost 3 times in his career, all via decision, 1 to Tim Boetsch, 1 to Akihiro Gono in June of 2006, and the other to Gegard Mousasi in November of 2006. While Palhares has lost 4 times in his career, twice via knockout, 1 to Alan Belcher, the other to Nate Marquardt back in 2010, and he's lost twice via decision, notably to Dan Henderson in 2008. Palhares, though, has picked up wins in the UFC over Jeremy Horn, Dan Miller, and Mike Macenzio to have a 7-3 record in the octagon since entering in May of 2008. Of course, Lombard 0-1 in the UFC, but is a former Bellator champion with wins over Trevor Prangley, Alexander Shlemenko, and Joe Dirksen. Lombard is 34 years old, has been fighting since 2004, while Palhares is 32 years old and has been fighting since 2006. Lombard was actually on a 25-fight unbeaten streak before entering the UFC with 24 wins and 1 draw. He was a Cuban Olympian in judo and moved to Australia and began his fighting career there. Now trains in the U.S. at American Top Team in Florida. Of course, he is a judo black belt, so kind of a hometown fight for Hector Lombard. Palhares, a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt. He's from Brazil and representing Brazilian Top Team. Palhares plus 170 the dog. Lombard minus 210 the favorite. Again, I've got to side with the odds makers here. I don't think Lombard is going to be caught by anything Palhares tries to throw at him. I don't think Lombard is going to be submitted. He's got excellent submission defense. I mean, this dude's never been submitted or knocked out. He is maybe impossible to finish. Palhares, on the other hand, was finished and knocked out in his last fight by Alan Belcher. Lombard, 17-31 wins via knockout. I think he'll be able to pull out another one and either get a decision or a knockout. Either way, I like Lombard minus 210 to beat Palhares on Friday night.
Well, Hector Lombard, I think, is stepping in with an extremely dangerous fighter on Friday night. Rousimar Palhares is very good, but when it comes to stepping up in competition, Palhares has not necessarily been up to par. But maybe the same thing can be said about Hector Lombard, considering he was a big fish in a small pond. He very disappointing debut, very lackluster fight. I hope to see a better performance from Hector Lombard than what we saw on July 21st. I still expect him to win, and I hope it's a knockout or something.
Palhares to me showed in his last fight that he's got one game plan. He's going to try and get your legs, and he's going to try and rip them off. He's going to try and take one of your legs home with him. And if that doesn't work, well, he really doesn't have plan B. And
he's very one-dimensional.
If you can punch him in the face while avoiding the leg locks, you're going to win. I think Alan Belcher opened up the keys to beating Rousimar Palhares in a major way.
Showing how to
avoid
get out
those
of
leg locks, avoid the leg locks, and punch him in the face. And I think Hector Lombard is smart enough to know that. And Hector Lombard also, again, guy's never been finished. I think it's going to be very, very tough to submit that guy. And he's not one of these guys with long limbs. You want to knee bar this guy, it's going to be very tough. He's a short, stocky type dude. It's very difficult to submit guys with that kind of body type. So I'm going to go with Hector Lombard to win. I don't really see how he loses unless he gets really caught in something from Palhares, which is always possible. Palhares is a jiu-jitsu ace, but I just see Lombard winning this fight. How about the main event? The two coaches for Tough Smashes, representing Australia, 14-4, George Sotiropoulos, and representing England and the United Kingdom, 13-6, Ross Pearson. This one in the lightweight division. Sotiropoulos coming off a knockout loss to 18-6 Rafael dos Anjos in his last bout in July of 2011, way back at UFC 132, so injuries have kept him out of action for a while now. Pearson also coming off a second-round TKO loss to 18-5 Cub Swanson on June 22nd of this year for a UFC on FX card. Pearson has 5 of 13 wins via submission with 5 decisions and 3 knockouts, while Sotiropoulos 8 of 14 wins via submission with 5 decisions and just 1 knockout. Pearson has lost 6 times in his career, twice via knockout, twice via submission, twice via decision, while Sotiropoulos has lost 4 times in his career, twice via decision, one to Kyle Noak in 2005, the other to Dennis Siver in 2011. Remember that name, Dennis Siver. Sotiropoulos lost once via knockout as well, and 1 disqualification, a DQ, to Shinya Aoki back in 2006. Pearson won the Ultimate Fighter Season 9 with a decision win over fellow countryman Andre Winner. He then picked up wins in the UFC over Spencer Fisher, Junior Asuncao, and Dennis Siver, one of the guys that beat George Sotiropoulos. Pearson, 28 years old, has been fighting since 2004 from Sunderland, England. Sotiropoulos is 35 years old, has been fighting since, for a while, fighting in the UFC since 2007. 7-2 UFC record for Sotiropoulos. Pearson is 5-3 since entering the UFC in 2009. He's a black belt in Taekwondo and a brown belt in Judo, while Sotiropoulos a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He actually competed on The Ultimate Fighter as well. He lost via knockout to Tommy Spear in the semifinals of The Ultimate Fighter Season 6, which Mac Danzig wound up winning. So Sotiropoulos competed on The Ultimate Fighter, did not win. Ross Pearson competed on The Ultimate Fighter and did win. Sotiropoulos fought Dennis Siver and lost. Ross Pearson fought him and won. Ross Pearson, though, the underdog, plus 110. Sotiropoulos minus 140, the favorite. And, Sotiropoulos and Pearson, both of these guys win the majority of their fights via submission. So I wouldn't expect Pearson to want to take it to the ground because I think Sotiropoulos is better at jiu-jitsu. But we've seen from Sotiropoulos that he struggles when it comes to getting it to that position. He struggles when it comes to taking the fight to the ground. And I think Ross Pearson will know this. He will come in game planning for George Sotiropoulos and will keep this fight standing. And standing up, I believe Ross Pearson has the advantage. So I'm going to go with plus 110, the underdog, Ross Pearson to beat George Sotiropoulos. I don't like the fact that Sotiropoulos has not fought since July of 2011. And I think, Pearson got knocked out in June, but Cub Swanson is on an absolute tear. I think Pearson has the edge standing up and will keep it standing up and will avoid the dangerous ground game of George Sotiropoulos, which to me is his primary weapon and maybe his only weapon. So I like Ross Pearson as the underdog to win in the main event.
See, I'm going the opposite way. I'm going with Sotiropoulos. I think Sotiropoulos is, great submission skills. Yes, he's shown difficulty. Yes, he did lose to Dennis Siver, whereas Pearson beat Dennis Siver. But the fact that Pearson lost his last fight at featherweight and was not necessarily was not overly impressive over his entire UFC run, and to have to come back up to lightweight, I think it's going to be a somewhat of an adjustment for him. And I like Sotiropoulos to come out the victor in this bout.
All right. Kevin likes Sotiropoulos. I'm going to go with Ross Pearson, and that's the show for tonight.